Welcome back. In today's module, we will jump into talking about our anthropoids. So if you guys are looking at your taxonomy chart, which I 100% recommend you do, so if you don't have that out, go ahead and hit the pause button, grab your taxonomy chart, and also grab your textbook, your Primates of the World textbook. So as we move through these lectures, it is important that you guys are able to figure out how to find these primates that we're talking about on the chart, but also know where they are in the book. Because when you have your taxonomy exam, you will be looking up some of these answers on both the taxonomy chart and in the book, as well as listening to the lecture. So being able to utilize all of the tools that you have for the course is critically important. So if you don't have either of those, I do suggest hitting the pause button, going and grabbing those so that you have them just sort of on hand as we go through this. Again, these lectures are very much an overview. Taxonomy is not the most interesting subject when we're talking about our primates, but it is important for us to understand morphologically or physically how primates have evolved. Once we get into the more behavioral lectures, having all of those extra tools on hand won't be as necessary to go through the lectures. So again, hit the pause button if you don't have those, go ahead and grab them. All right, so today we're going to talk about our anthropoids. Now, anthropoids and Haplorhine are the same thing. Okay, so those can be interchangeable terms. And the reason that I mention that is because depending on what literature you're looking at, some may refer to these as anthropoids, some may refer to them as Haplorhine. They are the same. It is definitely worth taking a look over there at your taxonomy chart to know that we are in our Haplorhine section when we're talking about those subfamilies. So some major characteristics of our Haplorhine, again, it's going to go back to noses. So the rhine we know means noses. We are also anthropoids, so we have dry, unconnected noses, right? We don't have a moist nose, and we don't have that connected upper lip. Haplorhines will live in Africa, Asia, and South America. And it comprises monkeys, apes, and humans. Again, remember, our prosimians are not monkeys. And then within the Haplorhine, we have two groups. We have our Catarrhines and our Platyrrhines. So if you guys are taking a look at your taxonomy chart, you'll see we have our suborder of Haplorhine. And then if we're looking at our superfamilies, our suborder, infraorder. I needed to take a look at the chart myself. So we're looking at our Haplorhines, and then we have those broken down into Platyrrhine and Catarrhines. So today we are going to talk about Platyrrhine, or our New World monkeys. So again, looking at those noses, we're going to be able to determine where these monkeys live and again, what infraorder they fall into. So just like we were able to look at our Strepsirrhini and see that they still had those very kind of dog-like noses, we're going to be able to look at our Haplorhine and see, again, dry noses, disconnected upper lip, but very distinct noses. So let's take a look at our Platyrrhine. That's an Uakari, and they live in South America. And he's a very extreme example of some of the characteristics that I'm going to talk about with his nose. So you can see the nose is separated by or divided by a really wide septum. Do you see how wide that septum is? His nostrils are really, really far apart, okay? And those nostrils are also pointing out laterally, right? They're pointing out towards the left and the right of his face. Now, if we look at this little girl over here, she is a Catarrhine. She is an old world primate. And her nose, again, is still dry. She's got that disconnected lip, but look at her nostrils. So she's got a very little septum dividing that nostril, and they point downwards, okay? So you can see how that nostrils, those septums, are very, very different between our New World primate and our Old World primate. So again, looking at our rhine, looking at our nose, we can tell a lot about a primate. So when I say old world and new world monkey, what the heck does that mean? So old world is everything that you see there on your right. That's Europe, Asia, Africa. That's considered the quote old world. Okay, so all of our old world primates are going to come from Africa or Asia. The new world is the Americas. So think about, those early explorers setting sail for the new world. They were setting sail for the Americas. So our New World primates are going to be South and Central America. So let's take some general overview of the differences between our Platyrrhines and our Catarrhines. So again, we talked about those nostrils and septums. So our Platyrrhines, our New World monkeys, have large nostrils separated by a wide septum. Again, the dental formula is going to be a little bit different. I don't dive very deeply at all into that in this course, but just be aware that those are different. Habitat uses, our New World monkeys are going to be almost strictly arboreal. So we do have a few that will come down at times to ground level, like our capuchins, but they're going to spend, they're arboreal. As opposed to our Catarrhini, our Old World monkeys, there are both. We do still have a few nocturnal species in our Platyrrhini, whereas once we move to our Catarrhini, they're daytime only. So how they carry their infants. So Platyrrhini, New World monkeys, are going to carry their infants dorsally on their backs. Okay, so these infants are going to go for a piggyback ride, where our Old World monkeys are going to be carried ventrally, which is on our fronts, chest to chest. Okay, infant care by males is sometimes seen in our Platyrrhines. So we'll see with some of our little Callitrichids that males do play a large role in infant care. But again, once we move into our Old World monkeys in the next section, very rarely are males involved in any infant care. So again, for today's module, we're going to be focused on our New World primates. So all of this area here that you see in yellow is where we're going to find the primates that we're going to talk about in this module. So if we're looking at our taxonomy chart, we talked about our suborder Haplorhine, our infraorder, we're in our Platyrrhine, and now we're over at our superfamily. So this chart that we're looking at right now represents our superfamily of Ceboidea, okay, Ceboidea. And within that superfamily, again, we have some families. We have our Cebidae, okay? And their common names are going to be like our squirrel monkey and our capuchin. They are typically small to medium sized, and they live in large multi-male, multi-female families. Some special features, and they are strictly seasonal breeders. They have large brains. The strictly seasonal breeder applies to the squirrel monkey. And then in terms of our capuchin, they have very large brains. Of our New World monkeys, they do have the largest encephalization quotient. Remember, that's that body to brain size. They are very smart. They use tools in the wild. They are the only New World monkeys that we see doing that in the wild. They are adaptable and resourceful. So they are very much like our Old World monkeys. They are often compared in studies to Old World monkeys. And they have a weakly prehensile tail. So what does that mean? I'll talk a little bit later about prehensile tails and the differences. So capuchin monkeys are the monkeys that you will see in film and TV often to represent, quote, monkeys. So even if a monkey is in Africa, like our little monkey in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, the monkey in the movie Outbreak. So whenever we see a monkey, it's usually a capuchin because they're so dang smart. But remember, they live in South and Central America. So they're often used in the wrong geographic location. Okay, so let's put a pin in that prehensile tail comment until we get to the end of this little chart. So next we have our Callitrichids, which we call our squirrel-like monkeys. They're very small. These are our marmosets and tamarins. They practice polyandry, which means that one female often mates with two males or has two male partners. Twins are really common, and there's a high paternal or male investment in reproduction. And then we have sometimes reproductive suppression. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then we have our Atelidae, which are going to be our Ocaris, which was that little red-faced monkey we saw at the beginning. Our Sakis, we have those at the Buffalo Zoo. Howler monkeys, spider monkeys, woolly spider monkeys. These are going to range from medium to very large. Socially, our Ocaris and Sakis are typically monogamous, and they live in swamps. We don't know a lot about them because of where they live. The swamps are really hard to get to study. Our howler monkeys are large. Again, think about maybe like 20, 25 pounds. They live in one male, multi-female groups. So one breeding mature male will live with multiple females. They are known for their very loud howling. These guys have strong prehensile tails. And then our spider monkeys, who are very large. Now, they're very large, but they are also very spindly and lanky. So they don't weigh a lot, but they do have super, super long arms and legs. And they live in large fission fusion communities. So many males and many females will live together. We'll talk a little bit about these social communities in this section, but we'll dive a lot deeper when we talk about behavior. And then these guys also have very strong prehensile tails. So what the heck does this mean with the prehensile tail? So let me dive into that a little bit so that you guys can understand. A prehensile tail is essentially like an extra hand. Okay, this means that they can wrap their tail around objects, and they're pretty dexterous. Well, anyways, you know what I'm trying to say with those tails. So our Ateles, like our spider monkeys and our howler monkeys, these tails are truly, truly prehensile. They can act like another hand. The bottom or underside of the tail is furless. It has a tactile pad like a hand. It has a fingerprint. They can wrap that around something and bear their entire body weight by that tail. So it truly is like an extra limb. With animals like our capuchin, when we say it's a weakly prehensile tail, they can wrap that tail around something for extra support, but they cannot bear their body weight, and their tail is fully furred. So there's no sort of tactile pad. So it does help, but it's not nearly as strong or as useful as that prehensile tail we're going to see in the spider monkey or the howler monkey. Okay, so I know that overview we just went through was a lot. So just so you guys know, in this module, there's also a video that will show these animals in the wild. I think it's hugely important that you guys, after listening to this lecture, go over and watch that video so you can see these guys in action. That way, some of these things will be a little bit more obvious because you can see them in real life. Okay, so let's jump in and talk about the difference between Cebus versus Callitrichid. So, our Cebidae are what we call true monkeys. So those are going to be like your capuchins and your squirrel monkeys. They are medium in body size, so maybe about 10, well, a squirrel monkey can be probably 8 to 10 pounds. A capuchin maybe 10 to 12. Again, don't get too worried about the dental formulas, but nails and claws. So again, we have nails on all of our digits, okay? So with the Cebidae, our true monkeys, nails on every finger. Okay, they give birth to single infants. Male care is rare and indirect. So indirect care would be like maybe helping to protect the group, but they're not hands-on in any way with the infants. Alloparenting means care of the infants by somebody other than their parents. It's absent. So we don't see alloparenting. And our Callitrichids, now don't get confused because we call our Callitrichids squirrel-like monkeys, meaning they do almost look rodent-like still. They look a little bit more like our Strepsirrhini, but they have all of the physical characteristics that would make them, in terms of their nose and their dental formulas and things like that, make them Haplorhine, but they are very rodent-like. Now, under the Cebidae, we do have a monkey whose common name is the squirrel monkey. So please, I know that's, why would we do that to you, to torture you? But our callitrichids are often called squirrel-like monkeys. We do have several of these at the Buffalo Zoo. If you guys do watch that film, you will be able to see these guys in action. So it should help you kind of understand that. These guys are tiny. They're very little monkeys, only a couple inches tall. They still have claws on all of their digits except for their big toe. They typically have twins, and care by males is direct and present. So again, they live in a polyandrous social structure. We're going to dive into social structures in the next section after taxonomy, but what that means is that one female often has two males that she breeds with. And because she has infants, they help her take care of those infants because she wouldn't be able to do that on her own. Alloparenting, care by somebody other than the parents, is present in most species. So what will happen is, and that's why in the last slide we saw that that sexual reproduction could be like restricted, is that often a mature son or daughter will remain behind at the nest also to help their parents care. So they'll repress their sexual breeding to help their parents. So we do see that pretty often in these little species. So you will see, you know, family groups of like 5 to 6 sometimes living together. So these little guys represent two of our callitrichids. Again, really little, very rodent-like, very small. Again, you can see that nose, right? You can see that large septum between their nostrils, and those nostrils sort of facing out to either side. So we have a golden lion tamarin, which we definitely have at the Buffalo Zoo. And we have a little pygmy marmoset over here. And here's a picture that shows, again, tons and tons and tons of variation in these callitrichids. So this guy here in the bottom corner with this beautiful mustache, he is an emperor tamarin. We have a cotton top tamarin, again, another golden lion. So you can see the peltage or the coat color is very, very different among them. And one of the reasons for this, now write this down, I imagine you're going to see this somewhere like a taxonomy exam, is that we have poly-specific groups. So what does that mean? Poly means many, specific is species. So oftentimes you'll see multiple species feeding together. Okay, so you might see cotton tops and golden lions and emperors all feeding in the same general location. The food source that they feed on is tree sap. They're gumnivorous. So gums and saps from trees is a major part of their diet. It's a super high energy, full of sugar diet because these guys are super high energy little animals, right? So because their food source is so abundant and it doesn't need to be protected, they often will group together in polyspecific groups or multi-species groups to feed in a tree that's, you know, leaking sap. So it's really, really, really important that they look different so that they don't accidentally breed with the wrong species, right? It makes them really, really obvious as to who belongs with who. So again, this is not because they look so handsome and interesting. It really serves a purpose ecologically for their survival. And I just throw in this slide because this is a newer discovery of our little callitrichids. You guys don't need to know all of these interesting characteristics about this Wade's marmoset, but it's important to know that these little guys, they're so tiny and they live in the rainforests of South and Central America. We are still making new discoveries of primates today. So we do not know everything there is to know. And again, there is still so much more out there to learn about all of these primates that live in our world. All right, let's talk about our Atelines, our Antilles. So we have a howler monkey here, a red-faced Okari. So these guys have those really strong prehensile tails. Remember we were talking about that? The next slide will show that really beautifully. So our howler monkeys, these are going to be pretty big, and you can see this guy's howling here. What you can't see in this photo is he's got a large throat sac. So right under his jaw. Think about a frog's throat sac. He's got a huge, huge throat sac that helps him howl, right? He's got this really throaty, deep, guttural howl. And the reason is that these guys live in a group, one male with many breeding females, and then their offspring. So they're pretty territorial, right? Because there's going to be lots of extra males around that are going to want to try to take over your group. So these guys will howl when they are marking their territories, right? When they first wake up in the morning. I did my field work in Costa Rica. We had many of these guys at our field station. They will howl, right? You'll hear like groups howling at each other, sort of different factions, so they know to stay away from each other's territories. So these guys are very, very loud, and that's why they're called howler monkeys. This little red-faced guy, we don't know a lot about him because, again, he lives in the swamps. There's some anecdotal stories about them. There hasn't been a lot of really quality field research done on them. They're pretty disliked amongst the locals because of their looks. They do look like little red-faced devils, so they have struggled with being killed by locals who think that they're little demons of the forest. These guys, we do think, live in monogamous pairs. They don't live in very large social groups. And this here's one of my favorite slides. So this shows 3 different spider monkeys. So this little beauty all the way on the right, we had these at my field station. They are the ballerinas of the forest. I also often go to Cancun and you'll see these guys there. So these show that sort of prehensile tail really, really well and how that can be used as an extra limb. So the tails you see here are wrapped around tree branches. If you were to look at sort of the area that's wrapped around the branch, that would be that naked sort of grasping area that would have its own kind of fingerprint. So again, these are all spider monkeys, and they move in like a true brachiation fashion. So what does brachiation mean? It's that arm over arm swinging. So if we think of Tarzan and he's sort of swinging arm over arm on the, or even how you would do monkey bars, that's how these primates move through the forest. So there are actually very few primates. They're the only primates in the New World that move through the forest by brachiation. So that tail obviously helps them, right? It gives them an extra point of contact with the branches and the trees. But the other interesting thing, and you can sort of see it here on this monkey in the middle who's kind of using her tail to get a drink. If you look at her hands, right, she's got these very, very, very long palms and very, very elongated fingers, right? That helps her swing through the branches. What you can't see is that she actually has a very teeny, 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 tiny, almost useless thumb. Well, prehensile thumbs are one of our markers of being primates, right? That's one of the trends that was hugely important. And what we're seeing with these guys is because of their locomotive pattern, because they swing arm over arm, that thumb actually gets in the way of that locomotion. So for these guys in particular, that's a specialization, that it's sort of de-evolved, right? So we would imagine that a common ancestor still had that prehensile thumb, but as they changed this locomotion pattern to go to brachiation, to move hand over hand through the forest, that thumb became less and less important and sort of became a little stump of almost nothing. The other interesting thing is not only are they the only New World monkey that has this brachiation pattern of locomotion, they are also the only New World monkey to live in a fission-fusion society. So what that means is that they live in very large social groups with many males and many females. They are the only New World monkeys where males are going to be the dominant of the genders. So typically our females are our dominant social structure, and they form that permanent social group. In this case, it's males. Males will stay in their natal group for life, right? They don't transfer groups, and they form the permanent social structure of their group. Now, because they live in such large groups, what they will do is fission and fusion throughout the day. So fission means separating. So they'll often separate into smaller, more family groups and forage throughout the rainforest throughout the day. And then at certain points for their mid-afternoon siesta, when they come together at the end of the day to go to sleep and build their nests, they will fuse back together. So these large groups will fission, separate into smaller groups, and then fuse back together. And the only other primates that do that are chimpanzees. So that's another thing that makes these spider monkeys very unique. And finally, we'll talk about our Cebids, our quote, true monkeys. So that's a photo right there on the left of a capuchin that's particularly a white-faced capuchin. We have brown capuchins at the Buffalo Zoo. There's little wedge-cap capuchins. So there's a couple different subspecies of capuchins. But again, these guys are brilliant. They live in large multi-male, multi-female groups. The females are dominant, meaning they form the permanent social structure. Males leave their natal group, the group they were born in, when they become sexually mature, and they will find new groups. Now, there is usually a dominant male within the group, but they will only stay in a group for a few years. Males will leave groups every few years, and the reason that they do this is to avoid inbreeding. So about the time that their daughters start to become sexually mature, a male will leave his group and form another group. So they do emigrate pretty often. So that's a little white-faced capuchin monkey. These are the guys that I studied in Costa Rica. They're little fantastic monkeys, super, super smart. Definitely, again, watch the film that's also in this module because you'll see a lot of really interesting behavior from these capuchins. And then right next to him, you see a little squirrel monkey. Again, these also form very, very large social groups, multi-male, multi-female groups, similar in social structure to our capuchins. I don't want to say they're not as smart. They're not shown to be as clever in the wild as our capuchin monkeys, but they are still great little monkeys, and again, will live in huge groups. A really interesting thing is that these guys are seasonal breeders. When the females come into estrus, it triggers a pheromone in the males, and they will retain water weight. So they look like little sumo wrestlers. The males will look like fat little pudgy sumo wrestlers when the females are ready to mate. And it's typically the fattest, pudgiest little sumo squirrel monkey that gets the most mates. So that's a little interesting tidbit about our squirrel monkeys. So again, these are our Cebids, and these guys are going to end out our lecture today on our New World primates. As always, take a look for the quiz and the discussion question. If you have questions for me, it's always best to email, but always utilize the resources of your peers in that discussion board as well. All right, so that's where we're going to end it. Again, please watch that other film that's in the module. I think it's going to really help you guys to see these monkeys in action.